Ed,
All comes.
yep, and all, Alice and Sarah, yep, all good.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
All right. Through the Chair, this report today proposes the priorities for the 2019 Letters of Expectation for each of the substantive CCOs, and it seeks approval of the expectations that are in the report to be used as the basis to draft the letters that will then be sent out in early December. The report also recommends for representatives to be delegated the responsibility to discuss the agreed expectations directly with the CCOs. This is a response to some of the feedback that we received from the CCOs and from the councillors to improve the face-to-face and the communications between the parties. Just like to note that the letters of expectations are not a statutory requirement, but they are intended to provide guidance to the CCOs on the priorities and the issues of importance that the council would like to or expect to see in the statement of intent. They do form part of a broader accountability framework, and we've been making a number of improvements to that accountability framework over the last year as part of the accountability review, notably updating the accountability policy and the long-term plan, and also some proposed reporting template changes that have been discussed recently. The draft expectations in this report have been identified on the basis of what has been recently approved in the long-term plan and Auckland plan. Also from feedback received from councillors at a workshop on the 23rd of October, where we discussed what would be the top 2 to 3 strategic priorities for each CCO. We subsequently sent that feedback to the CCOs themselves and asked for their feedback on that, and also what priorities they would like to see incorporated. As with previous letters of expectations, the proposed priorities are grouped into 2 areas, those that are common to all CCOs and those that are specific to each CCO. The common expectations reiterate what is in the updated accountability policy and the long-term plan, and they are asking the CCOs to focus on program delivery, notably the substantial capital program that has been provided for in the long-term place. Importantly, building and continuing to build trust and confidence with stakeholders, the shareholders, and also with our communities. To consider and implement the outcomes, directions and focus areas of the Auckland plan as a whole, and also to consider climate change and Māori responsiveness. I will take the rest of the report as read and happy to take any further comments or questions.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Because of the decision on Wednesday in and around Speedway, it does strike me that the resolution of the council was to actually work with RFA and Eden Park. Would you be recommending at this point, and I realise it's relatively recent for you, but in terms of those matters that we are expecting by way of delivery, is there an opportunity for that to be crafted in at this particular point in time?
Alistair.
Yes, if the expectation is for RFA to work with Council and Eden Park, I must confess I'm not entirely sure of the resolution from the previous night, but if the expectation is for RFA to work with Council to resolve these issues, then yes, I think that could be incorporated in. The current wording in the report, Claire, maybe?
So the current wording in the report is on paragraph 27, and it says to work closely with Council on any plans for strategic redevelopment of assets, particularly for stadiums.
So Mr. Chairman, I'm highlighting my interest, and it may be my own interest, but I suspect others will be interested as well, that if they're going to do any work on stadia, it must factor in Eden Park into the future, and that was a resolution of this committee on Wednesday. So I put that on the table as something that I would like to see woven into this document, please.
Councillor Walker.
Sure. I've also got an issue around regional facilities, and I'm looking at the bullet point that states actively engage with the council and arts and cultural institutions in the co-design of a strategy for the sector and supporting governance and funding arrangements. My particular concern there is we had a 17A report by Stafford, and there was a model that was put up that I thought had significant merit, which actually puts the institutions into a facility other than RFA, has elements of contestability and governance that some other leading cities have adopted. I have a real concern that RFA is internally conflicted, as it frankly is around stadiums, to be too involved. And in that regard, we also have a circumstance, for example, where ATEED subsidises events at RFA stadiums that in other countries such as Australia would be regarded as highly anti-competitive. It ain't a level playing field. So that goes to ATEED and what it does. So I think that in terms of our letters of expectation to a range of organisations, ATEED, RFA, Panuku Development, and I could probably give some examples around Panuku Development and the internal conflicts that it has, that there should be a benchmark around what's best for Auckland compared to just the interests of a particular council-controlled organisation. And I would like to see something in the letter of expectation that goes to that.
Okay, any further questions? I presume that was a question. So we've got Councillor Hulse.
That could be worked up.
Mayor Golf, Councillor Casey, Councillor Newman, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Darby and Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I've just got, I think, 3 quick questions. Auckland Transport, we're talking here about them taking their capital program, sorry, page, what are we on, 26, their capital program taking into account the impact of transport investment on urban form. I think that's fundamentally the wrong approach. We need their capital program to be guided by or to give effect to our planning. So there we plan, land use planning actually guides the way transport happens. Transport doesn't make land use happen, and I think we fundamentally need to put that in our SOI. Transport might push back, I think, unless we start to get that around the right way. So I just wonder, is that possible that we can do that? That's my first point. Secondly, I am concerned under Panuku that we have the benefits of redevelopment to communities. We just say fully explained. I think that is a very weak way of putting it. We'll come and tell you what we're going to do. The benefits of redevelopment to communities are fully realised, to me, really strengthens it, so we're making the most of it. I hope that's useful. I'm posing these as questions. Yep. Don't know any other way of making suggestions. And I think I'll leave Councillor Darby to pick up the climate change issue, because I think he's given a lot of thought to that. And finally, are we comfortable that within the wording around ATEED, we're clear enough that we understand that these are regional issues, so that the issue of whether ATEED does or doesn't fund the Santa Parade is never going to be raised in this context. We've actually said quite clearly in the SOI, we want you to deal with the regional visitor economy and job creation and employment. Santa Parade doesn't do that. Yep. So we're clear enough in the SOI that we're clear that ATEED's job isn't to fund things like the Santa Parade. I just want to make sure that that clarity exists. So those sort of questions, but I guess my requests for clarification.
Through the Chair, I think that we can certainly accommodate those questions and modify the statements to reflect that in the final letters of expectation.
Thank you.
Can I just, through the chair, I think we always have this every year, sort of part of our challenge as staff is we get asked questions and given comments and we'll note down what they are, but is it safe to assume that we should do that unless we hear howls of protest from the majority, or without passing a resolution on every comment? If we get general nods, is it safe to assume that that is the will of the committee?
That could be my question. Would you like me to make those a more formal statement, Mr. Chair?
I think you might have to today.
I'm happy to do that.
Mayor Goff.
I didn't see the call.
Okay,
Mr.
right,
Chair.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Ross. A couple of things. First of all, I can't see the letters, so I can't remember if there's anything in the letter about the no surprises policy. Penny mentioned the Santa parade. No surprises. We were surprised by the trams. We were surprised by the Santa parade. It ain't working. So the words that are in there currently, if there are any, aren't working. So we need to review that. And if it's not in the letter, we need to put it back in the letter with a stern reminder that we actually cop the flak for all the bad things that go wrong in Auckland. So what's in there at the moment, Alistair, about no surprises? Is it just no surprises? Because nobody's paying attention to that.
Well, look, it's a standing expectation. We can highlight it again, but it's a performance issue. If there are things that they are doing that are surprising you, then I'd suggest the correct thing to do is raise that directly with them when you are surprised, or at the quarterly performance meetings.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think, councillors, whilst the farmers one might be a bit of a surprise in some ways, it really isn't a surprise given the objection of the accommodation providers who didn't want to have anything to do with anything that was any promotion that wasn't going to fill hotel rooms. And I'm sorry, that was an underlying
No, Ross,
thing.
the surprise is that if we'd known about that, we could have dealt with it. There's a mechanism that we could have funded the Santa parade. If we'd known, the media around it would have been quite different.
Yeah. No, I'm just pointing out that's why we have set up that committee, which includes the accommodation providers who are there.
Right, I'll move on. If you
make
think there's nothing
recommendations.
wrong with the no surprises clause, and if that's the view of all my colleagues, that's fine. I just think it doesn't work, and we need to maybe even change the words no surprises to something else. My next one is, there's been a couple of really good decisions by council in recent weeks before this report was since this report was prepared. And what I'd like to see included, because it is an organic living thing we're talking about, it's a letter from us, I'd like to ask the CCOs how they are going to promote Auckland as a city of music. Ha! Water care, there's a challenge.
Fountains with music
Well,
playing.
and the reason I'm saying that is that we had a great presentation from a Canadian councillor who said the reason... Which place was she?
Music Canada.
No, we're in Canada.
Toronto, I think, wasn't it?
She said that the way that Toronto became the hub of music was by everybody working together. And that includes, she said, your CCOs, the whole family. So ask them all if they could let us know how they are incorporating the UNESCO Creative City of Music. And while you're at it, the next paragraph, we had a great decision the other day at the Community Development Safety Committee to commit to CEDAW, which is the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And I would like to ask the CCOs what they do to make sure that they're going to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. So that's what we've decided to do, and they're part of our family, and they probably don't know that we've done that.
I didn't know you'd done that.
Well, there you go then.
So we've had a few people speak already. There's not many questions. There seems to be quite a few directives. I think we should stick to questions.
Okay,
but
I've got a
I suppose I'm
question.
blending it a bit.
Oh, wait, this is a
Well,
question.
if-
My question is, can that be put in, please?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Yeah.
good. That's
And I
good.
haven't had an answer.
Through the chair, I mean, we can include those questions, in the letter of expectation if that's what councillors would like. Alternatively, we could ask the CCOs in a separate manner, indirectly through letters or in another way to answer those questions.
I prefer it in the statement of intent because it's a living, breathing document. My other comment was something up there about councillors, ward councillors. We're ward councillors.
Yeah, well, I didn't put that as, that's not a chair's recommendation, that's been snuck in, and we'll ask the person who snuck it in a minute.
I
who's-
agree.
Who's actually coming up soon.
Because it's the CCOs who do not recognise us as ward
Okay, so
councillors.
I'm going to ask, I'm
Yep.
going to move Councillor Simpson ahead then. So Councillor Simpson.
So, with respect, Mr Chairman, it wasn't snuck in, it was emailed to you on Monday night ahead of the Finance and Performance.
Oh, I haven't got that. Okay.
I copied
alright,
it to you.
Okay.
So, with respect, I don't think that's quite correct.
It actually was to you.
And
No,
my
but
intent-
anyway, moving on,
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
explain?
I'm just saying, well, you
Yeah.
just said it was snuck in.
Yeah, yeah, well, I'm sorry.
And
I
then,
haven't seen it.
I absolutely agree. By councillors, I meant ward councillors, happy to add that. And if it's my turn, may I ask
Yeah,
my
yeah.
question now?
Yeah, yeah.
So, bearing in mind that CCOs are part of Auckland Council, could you please explain to me what you mean by council under RFA? Do you mean council parent? Do you mean councillors? Or whom or what do you mean?
The real bosses or the pretend ones?
Item number 27.
Work
Work closely with council, is it council parent or councillors, whatever, on any plans for strategic redevelopment of assets, particularly for stadiums. Actively engage with the council, council parent, councillors, mayor and councillors, an arts institution. Who exactly who are
Elected
you
members,
talking about?
officials, yeah.
The answer, councillor, is probably all of the above in a sense. It's definitely engage with councillors, but also at a staff level. So it is definitely the council parent.
Can you add council parent? Because the terminology, I mean, as I said, CCOs are part of Auckland Council. I just think that just keeps us tidy. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, Councillor, do you just want to explain C as well? Just, where
I'm
you're
happy
coming
to
from?
do that, yes. So, it's around the, we gave Auckland Transport, the local boards currently have, for this year, $500,000 for local transport initiative projects, call them LIPs, right? We gave them an extra $500,000, so they've now got $1 million.
Yep.
All right? Auckland Transport have now given them, there's a proposal to give them an extra $1 million, so they'll have $2 million for transport programs, particularly on road safety. And
42 million?
and what they are doing at the moment is going just directly to local boards to work that in. So, but we're bearing in mind to work out what those projects should be. They're only asking local boards. So I thought we should be asked as well, and I've spoken to some colleagues, and I thank my colleague Linda Cooper for sending this through when I was out the other night. So I was just basically adding us as part of a stakeholder group for that engagement.
I think that's something that we can definitely do as part of a report I'm writing to bring to you on 11 December related to the governance framework review. Auckland Transport is developing new protocols for how the local board transport capital fund will be, projects will be determined. I think that in respect to the safety fund, we could probably speak to Auckland Transport with a view to including ward councillors in that, in the process. I think the other recommendation B up there about delegating representatives to discuss what comes out of today's meeting with the various CCOs is another opportunity to talk directly to Auckland Transport about your interest in being involved in that process. And the final thing is also as part of the GFR report that I'll be bringing, AT are developing new protocols around engagement with ward councillors that will be part of that report.
I'm happy to leave it if you're happy to include it in the recommendations, because at the moment they're going around the local boards and we're not part of that process.
Well, we're often not part of a lot of processes.
Exactly, even though we... Well, this is one way of actually just putting it in the SOI, that's all.
So I'm going to move Councillor Cooper forward. Do you want to speak to this as well, Councillor Cooper? I've seen you were involved.
This, but also just a general comment, if
Yeah,
that's
that's right.
okay.
Well,
Yep, so just in terms of that, I mean, I think we all know the pain of feeling like we had to vote for the petrol tax. And this safety improvement money is from the petrol tax. And I actually, from my point of view, it's very evident that a lot of the times we take the pain and do the hard decisions, but don't get any say in how that's used, and I think this is one avenue. We are ward councillors, we know our communities as well, and I think it's, you know, it should be more of a partnership when it comes to that, especially, you know, the ability to actually prove to people what we said. We did say it would go back into our communities, and we need to be part of that. Yeah, so for me, it's not enough to get a quarterly report and say, oh, didn't you know about that? Because we don't. And the local boards, for the most part, don't tell us. So I think this would be really good. So my other comment is around the whole concept of having CCOs, and we talk about no surprises, and I understand that, but that's more of an element between a chair and a chief executive of an organisation, really. But for me, I think there's a lot of delegations that CCOs have, and actually they need to be let to get on and do it. And for the most part, our idea of no surprises is, oh, that wasn't politically unpopular, now we don't like it. And for the most part, we don't take a lot of interest, except if it affects us personally. And I understand that, but I think we've also got to be careful what we put in here, that we're not directly directing something that is actually sometimes can undermine the delegation they actually have. You know, we're saying make sure you manage stuff properly and have these outcomes, and then we quickly jump in and go, oh no, but we want this to happen, and it can often cut right across the actual objective that they have and we've agreed to early on, and that's what I worry about a little bit. You know, we've appointed all of these boards now. I don't think there's any government appointments left. So we have all approved. I don't remember any councillor voting against any appointment. And so so that says to me, we have said we have faith in these people to have ability to make decisions. So for me, I struggle a little bit with us having to keep putting every little bit piling on. And I mean, with respect to Councillor Casey's wanting to have music and all that, that's lovely. But if it's going to take away from the core role of these organisations, which is huge stuff, massive assets, big stuff has to be delivered, and often a lot of it is our bread and butter, transport, pipes and things like that. And of course we need to have a nod to some of these things, but if it takes them off course, music on the buses. But in the sewer pipes, no. You know, so we've got to be a bit realistic about this.
Would be interesting.
And I just think we've got to be careful to be all, oh, that's lovely and it's all lovely in the garden, but I want them to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. And I don't want them to be distracted by that. If they can incorporate it, fine, but I don't want them to have to specifically appoint someone to try and work it all out and take them off their course. So I think for me it's about being practical, and I looked some of this stuff over the last little while and the issues we seem to have. I'm not highly unhappy, but you know, if we brought everything back in house, we could not cope.
There's an idea.
We could not cope with the amount of meetings and resolutions we would have to do to deal with all this stuff.
Well,
so I think
don't know about
I didn't interrupt you, so can I just? I haven't got my 5 minutes yet.
Councillors, let's just.
So I'm just saying.
Tuesday.
I just want to be real. I just want us to be. I'm fine. That's it. Done. Get in the middle.
Councillor Gibbon.
Can't be bothered with the rudeness.
Yeah, this is like deja vu.
Thank you, Chair.
Classic.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting, really. A couple
said
of
that a couple of times.
Yeah. A couple of questions, actually, and then just a process issue, Chair, and how we're going to resolve this. I wondered, in the proposed wording for the Auckland Transport SOI, we've got improved transparency on critical asset maintenance programming. Why do we have to use the word critical? I would want transparency on asset maintenance programming broadly. So that's the first question. So could you address that? Why are we only referring to critical?
If councillors agree, then I think we could take critical out. That would be fine.
Yeah, Chair, I would like to do that, and with indulgence, I mean, I don't know if this has to be by resolution or if it could just be included. My preferred wording would be improved transparency on asset management programming, including the timing, delivery and standard of asset renewals. And the reason for that is particularly in the road maintenance contracts in outer suburban areas. I think that there is evidence that the guidelines for road maintenance that Auckland Transport is supposed to apply isn't being applied to the standards set out in those guidelines. And so when you have a look at those outer suburban roads in my ward and in Franklin in particular, with the big heavy trucks, they are chewing up those roads, which really should be built to a standard that will accommodate that, and the time for doing that is at the time of the renewal of the assets. But if we don't have transparency around the asset management programming, it makes it difficult. I mean, I've got a 6-page letter here that I'm waiting for the Chief Executive to respond to on some of these questions. So, Chair, I mean, I can put up the wording.
No, I'm getting the impression that there's no problem, and I certainly have some
I can
sympathy
send
with
the
that.
wording through to you.
Yeah, if you could send the wording through to us and we can complete
Okay,
that.
all right. And I'm assuming that Councillor Hulse is going to put some wording up shortly, because I mean I've got some alternate comments in
Yeah,
relation.
we're just having a little look at Councillor Hulse's.
Okay, so I'll reserve my right to speak.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire and team. And thanks for meeting with me this morning, Claire and Ed. So, look, I'm just a little bit concerned. The reason we're here is to look at a different way of doing this. That's what we all decided. And so it's in two parts. There's the common messages, you've outlined that, and then there's the specific strategic areas, and the emphasis is on strategic. And I'm just a little bit concerned that if we start to drop down into, you know, what I just thought of, then they're not going to be strategic areas. Can we just back up a little bit, Chair, and just maybe go over what we should be including in the two parts here?
Sure. So the common messages are the ones that we think apply across all CCOs and that we want them all to factor in and consider. The specific expectations are intended to be what are the key focus areas that we want them to really prioritise and focus on over the next year. They need to be, you know, funded and aligned to our strategic direction, and we want them to be, you know, attention drawn to in the statement of intent that we will be then looking to approve. I think there are a number of other matters that get raised that there are other vehicles to have those conversations with the CCOs on. Some of them can be, as Alistair's alluded to, in the performance, quarterly performance meetings. Others that can be conversations that we have in workshops. Others can just be questions that we could pose to the CCOs and ask them for a response. It is meant to be the strategic priorities that we are wanting them to consider.
Yeah, so just going to some of those, I did discuss with you this morning the challenge we have with Auckland Transport around its OPEX budget. We're going to be looking at that in the new year, and you've got some suggested wording for that, and I've seen that, and I don't really want to go and put it up here. In fact, on the wording, I think it's best that we raise the issue and then the staff resolve the words. Otherwise, we could word our way into somewhere that doesn't actually deliver what we want. So the OPEX issue I'll take as handled.
Yep.
The other question I raised was just in terms of the common messages. The Auckland Plan 2050 is a common message for them all. But then when we come to Auckland Transport, we emphasise a particular outcome and focus area, etc., in terms of transport and access for everyone. And I guess my concern there is when you start to do that, you're actually doing exactly what the Auckland Plan does not anticipate. And it doesn't anticipate any part of the organisation looking at just one part of the plan. It really anticipates a looking at all the threads. And I guess while I'm not necessarily opposing what you've written, I'm just wanting it to be in a way that we're not sending a signal to Auckland Transport. You just have to look at this area. It says transport, because that won't address the very issue that Councillor Hulse raised. Is there just a way of, I'm probably just parking this as a question for you to resolve in the way you might finally word it?
I mean, I think the question that comes back is we can easily take out that reference just specifically, more specifically in Auckland Transport. The thing that I would like to get the certainty on is that those sub-bullet points are the ones that we think are the strategic priorities for Auckland Transport to be focusing on.
Yep, and I agree with those. So coming to those, and there has been a question about safety. So I actually think it's already there, and we find ourselves reacting to something that we just learned about a budget. Now, I think that's handled by a letter from the Mayor, rather than in this document. It just sits below a big strategic direction, but it is of concern to people. But it's actually the sort of thing that should be just picked up through correspondence or an email or the next discussion that the Mayor might be having with the Chair and the Chief Executive. I think we need to, and I say this with respect to the people who have raised these points like UNESCO or CDOG, it's actually that's resolved through a conversation. Otherwise, you clutter up your big strategic directions with stuff that's important, but it's not a big strategic direction. And I'm just wanting us to stay elevated here. So can you explain the other avenues for those lower level and important things?
Through the Chair. So as I mentioned before, there are the quarterly performance reporting when the CCOs come to the councillors. There are the workshops that we have scheduled in for a year, and that's 2 for Auckland Transport and 2 for Watercare and 1 for the other CCOs. There are opportunities that we could just bring together, you know, councillors and individual board members if we need to. We can send letters, we can have conversations between staff, and there is the Mayor, board chair. There are board performance reviews that we can also use as an opportunity to have conversations. I'm trying to think of all the other accountability mechanisms. There are a number that we can be using more effectively.
I guess that, I know you had to repeat that, but thank you. But there are a lot of other vehicles that we can use for those important and not big strategic directions. They're lower order, and I would prefer that we use those avenues. Hey, just going back, Councillor Hulse has asked me to address the climate change one, which we are both have had a look at. And I guess there is a strategic document coming up.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to identify the document and ask the CCOs to respond to the document. Councillor Hulse, is that the best way?
Through the Chair, that is when it becomes available. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just what's been put up there are 2 suggestions from Councillor Hulse, but I noticed, Alistair, that AT, Auckland Transport, has been removed from the first one and Panuku from the second, is that?
That was
So
probably...
is that meaning this is for all CCOs?
No, they were to relate directly to Panuku and Transport. Forgive me, I was perhaps trying to be too brief, which is unusual for me.
So we should say ensure that AT's Transport Capital Program gives effect. Yep, we'll do that. And ensure that Panuku's community engagement assists decision making. Yep?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll put those words back in. We now have Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for that earlier interjection. That was out of order. I just want to check that my reading of the words here is correct. So we've got specific words, so I just want to make sure that they tally with the literal meaning of those words and certainly my interpretation of them. So we have in the first instance specific expectations that go to each CCO. So I've got 2 CCOs expectations I want to check. The first one is Regional Facilities Auckland, and the words I'm thinking of, or the words that are down here, are work closely with council. Council's been clarified on any plans as they go to redevelopment of assets, particularly the stadiums. So I'm assuming work closely, any plans, stadiums means that would result in the provision of the information that they've got, plans in the first instance, and costings, accurate costings that accompany those plans, and then any communications that go to those plans or clarifications of questions raised by council. So am I correct in assuming that that's what those words mean? Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, it just becomes nebulous. So I've picked up the word specific. I've gone to this particular RFA. I'm applying my expectations in terms of what those words mean. Are they correct?
Look, I think the expectation to RFA is there's clearly some work that needs to be done around the various stadium. The expectation is that RFA will work with council staff on that. That will manifest itself in several areas. Presumably at some stage there'll be requests for funding, so that there would need to be the appropriate information provided to you as councillors so you can make informed decisions in annual plans or LTP processes. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the expectation is that RFA staff and board will work collaboratively with council staff so that we have all the information that we need to get to you so that you can make informed decisions.
Okay, so put it another way. We know already that they've got a whole lot of information that we haven't seen. Okay, so we know that. Is that going to be part of this working closely plans as they go to the stadium?
I fear I'm tiptoeing into the world of confidential reports which have been sort of discussed ad nauseum. I don't know what information is held and on what basis and what we need, so I don't know if I can answer that specifically, other than there would be a general expectation that council staff and you as decision makers would get all the information you need to make an informed decision.
Okay, well I'm assuming that's what working closely means, and I think any literal interpretation of those words would agree with that. Otherwise, it means nothing. My second CCO, in terms of the specific wording, Panuku, and the words I'm looking at in the second to last bullet point, ensure community engagement assists decision making, and the benefits of redevelopment to communities are fully explained. I just question the inclusion of the last words, fully explained. I'm assuming in any instance the benefits are fully explained because it's in their benefit, in their interest to do so. So I just wonder what we mean by that.
I think through the chair, Councillor Hulse had suggested that it was fully realised would be a better wording that
just up on the screen.
We would be happy to accept.
Okay. In terms of the first one, assist decision making, and I've been involved with a number of these community engagement sessions with Panuku, so I've got a reasonable insight as to what has been occurring. So what lies behind assist decision making? Is that implying that to reflectively, accurately reflect rather what the community are saying, or does it mean perhaps coming to an early realisation of community viewpoint that then would assist whether pursuing or making an earlier decision rather than going through a whole process. What do those words mean in that context?
Sorry, Claire, you look...
You want to...
I don't know if we can be that specific about every possible permutation, and I guess the analogy to draw is public consultation that we as a council undertake on various things, and that information, the responses from the public are provided to you to assist you with your decision making. Do you go with the majority, or do you take on board various specific points of feedback that's received in that consultation processes? It is information provided to assist with decision making.
Okay, again, I'm just trying to relate it in a meaningful sense as to what this means. So for instance, if I give you an example, perhaps that can help clarify what I'm trying to get at. So so had incidents out at say Gulf Harbour Marina where they went in community engagement, and we had a 100% response to the proposal and explanation that was put up by Panuku. Now, I'm assuming at a very early point that certainly assists decision making in terms of signalling the community view. And I say that because I thought I heard last time Mr. McDonald was in, a kind of recognition that that sort of response is an early signal to Panuku in terms of their decision making. So is that the sort of thing we're also talking about here, rather than just the generics of engagement and consultation that go council-wide?
Through the chair, that would be what I would be expecting to be in here, included in here as well, that they use and that they factor in engagement with the community where it's appropriate as part of their decision making in an appropriate
Thank you. Thank you, Ross.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Casey again.
Yeah, I just wanted to accept the learned advice of my colleagues Darby and Cooper and realise that that's not the best way to do this. But I have a question though. When we pass a resolution of council or committee, how does it get to the CCOs?
That is a very good question, Councillor. It used to be that they would get a minute where it was relevant to them, but that is not always the case now. I mean, I think we need to be clearer in our expectations in the resolutions, that if we want CCOs to be aware of it and to consider
Got to
it.
be in the resolution of the committee?
Yes.
And I'd suggest, if I could add to that through the chair, that it's probably incumbent on the staff bringing whatever report to the various committees that pass a resolution, if it does impact on the CCOs, to either contact us as a team or contact the CCOs directly. But clarity in the resolution to make that specifically clear.
So back to us. Yeah, so I accept that, so they shouldn't be in the SOIs. But it was something that Councillor Watson said that has sparked something in me, and that is that we occasionally get CCOs not approving, endorsing or supporting for example, a waterfront stadium or a new stadium. And I think, I don't want to see that anymore. I don't want to hear it anymore. And I'm talking about in particular about RFA and ATEED. So they may have a role we give them a role, but I don't expect them to make comment on something that we as a body haven't decided upon. And that's what the no surprises thing doesn't cover that. And I've heard both bodies express opinions about various stadia, including Eden Park and a new stadium somewhere. So how do we do that? I don't want them to do that anymore. I find that offensive.
I think through the chair, it's a matter of being clearer in our expectations of them. The CCOs have been asked to work together, and sometimes they might have misinterpreted that in terms of they're trying to provide their support and show you that they are working together in some of these spaces and that they're supportive. But I guess it is making it clearer that where their council decision hasn't been made, it may not be appropriate in the first instance.
Well, the resolution the other day was very clear that we want to tie-ho on things until we've had the bigger political discussion at this governing body. So can we make that clear, very clear, that that includes commenting on the future of a new stadium, basically?
Councillor, so just regards, so RFA, for example, I mean, how can they not talk about that? Because it's one of their key objectives, is to come back to, I mean, that's one of the key objectives we set them up with, was to come through with a new stadia plan for Auckland, and then we're saying don't talk about it. I mean, what are they going to come back
a new stadium plan is different from a plan for a new stadium.
Yeah, but it's very hard not to talk. I mean, I actually agree with you about a new stadium somewhere else, but it's very hard not to talk about Eden Park when it is here, it's built.
Yeah,
How do you
but
not
we
talk
as a
about it?
governing body have not had that political we haven't.
No, but
That's what all that was about the other day.
We agree with that, but
Yeah. Well, meantime, I don't need the CCOs chipping in from the wings about what they think. Until we've decided and we give them direction. That's our job. We give them direction. They don't give direction to us. Unasked for. Unasked for.
okay, but they are supposed to give us advice and some plans.
We asked for it.
Okay, all right, yep, all right, well. Okay, we have, okay, so I'm just asking, we've got another one that Councillor Newman has put up, and we're just going to put it up. Now, if people are happy with what is below C there, meaning what Councillor Hulse put up that one, Councillor Hulse put up the next one, and then Councillor Newman has put up the next one after that, which is there. Are people reasonably happy with those, because we would then move them up to be, yeah, I see, Wayne, yeah, C, D and E or whatever, so you wish to comment on that, Wayne?
Well, I raised some issues. I've actually got some specific words to cover off my concerns. They're relatively short. I'm happy to put them forward.
Okay, well, I think you should put them forward, and then, because that's what I'm just trying to do here without us
Okay,
going through everything.
shall I just
is what do people think? Yes, come
run
on.
through them very quickly?
Just, we've already done that, so come up with your words here.
What, give them to Sandra?
Yeah, yeah. So, are people happy with those three? Is there any?
I've got one comment on Penny's first.
Okay, no, we'll comment. I'm asking for comment. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, look, I just want to make sure, and I'm sure this isn't the intent, but, well, it might be, with respect to
Can we see it?
Auckland Plan and delivers an urban design outcome. I mean, one of the problems that I have, certainly Auckland Transport and emergency services have reflected to me in recent times, Chair, is in relation to newly developed subdivisions whereby emergency services just can't get, you know, the squad cars and the fire appliances down these very narrow lanes that have been designed with excellent walkability and urban design principles, I'm sure, but are a little impractical when it comes to the conveyance of vehicles down there for the provision of emergency services. So I do have a degree of concern about the way in which some of these subdivisions have been designed, and there is a current research program that's piece of work that's underway that's involving Auckland Transport and emergency services. Yeah, I like the idea of having you know, well-designed neighbourhoods, but if the intent is, I think, is to design those neighbourhoods in such a way as that they are not meeting the needs of those services that require the ability to convey emergency vehicles down there, then that would be an issue. So I'm just wondering if the wording is starting to get a little bit prescriptive.
Sorry, through the chair, that would be an issue, I think, for the district plan and the rules and the regulations as opposed to this.
And I think
Well, the difficulty with that, of course, is that the CCOs will say, well, actually, you know, they're not the requiring authorities, and what Cynthia Gillespie will say in answers to my questions is that they want to try and, Auckland Transport wants to try and deliver what the council wants. And what the council wants is good, but Auckland Transport needs to have a network that is going to function, and it needs to function in a way which allows for a balance of all needs, not just what we aspire to achieve through urban design principles.
But
Chair.
can I just say, sorry, just for a minute, yeah, but I'll come back to you, Bill, but I think...
And I'm not going to vote against this.
Because I think Councillor Hulse has been quite clear there where she's used the words transform and unlock program is about those areas, not greenfields when you can't get ambulances down the streets. And I think you remember, because you were there, Councillor New, when we were down there with Auckland Transport couple of weeks ago, I mean, you heard Cynthia say, oh, we've got all these things and we don't know where to start and which is the priority. And I think I said, and followed up with someone else and say, well, hey, look, we've already approved our spatial priorities and we've approved the Panuka work program. Just get on top of that. I mean, are you studying that? Because that should be your driver. So I think that's where she's coming from, whereas yours is a bit different. So I'm going to get to Councillor Cashmore, who has been following up that very issue.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for your words. You're on the money. The work's being done. The issue about the urban design, and Auckland Transport has recognised that it's not one recipe that fits all. So they are smartening it up. My sort of query is this. I personally have an issue with anything that's been suggested, but is this the right level to putting these things in, or is this? Are we starting to dive into operations, and is that our inputs to that level should be done other than an SOI?
Maybe I'll have a crack at it, and if I get kicked under the table, I know I'm on the wrong track here, but my understanding of the intent of this is for Auckland Transport to simply realise and appreciate that their infrastructure has a massive impact on the urban form, and that if they're doing a road renewal through a town centre, then 4-lane, regional arterial routes might be very efficient for the transport network, but it buggers up a town centre. So just be very conscious that the works that they're doing has a massive impact on the urban form.
Yep.
Sorry, was that what we intended?
Yep.
I don't think you got kicked, so that was probably...
No, and I think Councillor Hulse is nodding her head. Has been anything else, Councillor?
Yeah, there are some serious issues. I think with the new management team there that's been worked in, and the ability for councillors to get involved and talk to AT or any of the CCOs, I think is vastly improved from where it was. And it's just a matter of keeping those relationships open. And to Councillor Cooper's point about the local boards and the Auckland Transport extra funding, some of that is from the governance framework review work, and it's also again about the relationships. And I think it's really important that the councillors are copied in by the AT local board relationship people to all the information that goes to the local boards. I know I am, because I have a good relationship with that particular lady, but part of that onus is on us to try and achieve that as well.
And that is part of those ward councillor protocols that I referred to. That'll be coming to you in December.
Cool, thanks, Eddie.
Good.
Okay, so Councillor Darby. Yep.
So just on that one, just in response, and I'll probably address Councillor Newman's concerns. They're actually already being addressed. Auckland Transport are addressing your concerns and others. Councillor Hills and I met with them 2 weeks ago through the Roads and Streets Framework Review, the refresh, and the Transport Design Manual will be completed in the first quarter of next calendar year. And they're refreshing it, and part of the refresh is related to the movement of particularly emergency vehicles in street networks. So I actually think Councillor Hulse has worded that really well, and I think, can I just expect that the wording is actually to be passed over and then the staff can pick it up, because I don't, there's a couple of words there I think, oh no, that's the wrong way round, but it'll all land over there and get washed up.
We can have confidence. So I'm just asking again, people are happy to incorporate those three? Yep. Getting general nod around the place, okay. Right, now, I believe Councillor Walker, sorry? Councillor Walker, you said you were coming up with one, and now...
No, I didn't say that.
Well, you indicated you'd be brief, but now we've got a whole lot, so...
Well, I have spoken to a number of them earlier, but I thought some specific words would be useful. I can speak them very quickly, Mr. Chair.
We should meet as a group.
No, no. No, we've just agreed on that. No.
I'll write back to and suggest that...
Okay, well, we're actually just going to take a 5-minute break because it's going to take a while to mount these bit of discussion. Well, sorry, Councillor Walker's got 4 or 5 here, and they need to go up on the screen so we can have a look at them. So, sorry, we're just going to take a 5-minute break.